Welcome to Gallery 710. I'm Harlan, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most beneficial tools that you can put in your tool bag, the speed square. So let's talk about some of the key features of this tool. The first thing you're going to notice is its triangular shape. Now, the great thing about being a triangular shape is that we have two angles already on this device that we can go ahead and use just like that. We've got a nice perpendicular edge to this reference edge, making a nice 90-degree angle that is square to one another. We also have a 45-degree angle on this side, so we can use for marking as well. Now, one of the things that makes this tool very beneficial, and you'll notice immediately when you turn this, is this ledge. There is a nice little reference ledge here or overhang that allows you to take this tool and seat it up against your reference edge, whatever your material is. When you do that, you now have a nice 90-degree line or 90-degree reference to strike or mark a line across. This line, which you probably can't see, I'm going to get a little darker here and see if we can show that a little bit better. That line is now 90 degrees to this reference edge. Now I can also take this square, I can flip it, and I can use that mark, and using my 45-degree edge, I can go ahead and make a mark that references 45 degrees. See that there. All right, we've got a new piece of material here, a little bit lighter. This is a nice piece of cedar, just a 2x4 from a deck build, just a little cut-off piece. But, you know, we talked about this being able to make that nice 90-degree line in reference to this edge. Well, let's say, what if you want to make another angle that's not 90 degrees? Let's say, well, man, I just want to make a 30-degree angle. How can I do that? Well, if you look at this tool, and this is one of the other benefits of this, is that it's actually, other than being a square, it's a protractor. From here to here on this 45-degree edge, I can see degree increments, and it goes from 0 all the way up to 90 degrees. If I look here, I can see the word pivot, and there's a nice little indentation here. And this indentation is where I can pivot or reference off to get the angle I need. So let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to scribe another line other than 90. Well, let's say I'm going to reference it off of this edge. Well, to do that, I'm just going to take my speed square, I'm going to rotate it, and I'll set my pencil right into that groove. I'm going to rotate it until I see this 30-degree mark hit my reference edge here. So I'm going to rotate that to 30 degrees. Once that's there, then I know I can strike a line. It's now 30 degrees from here to here. So that is another way to use this tool to help in creating angles. I mean, I can go anywhere from 10 degrees. We'll do the same thing. I'll come in here. I'll hit that right there. I'm going to rotate 10 degrees. There's 10 degrees right off that edge. And I got a 10-degree line right there in reference to this 90. All right, so you probably see me switch pencils. And one of the reasons is, and my aluminum one usually has greater indentations on the side of this thing for helping a pencil seat really nicely for scribing and stuff. This being a plastic one, I don't quite get that benefit here. But there are grooves and indentations in the side of this thing that do help me, but mostly when I'm using a mechanical pencil, just because of the width of the lead being able to seat itself in there. The reason I bring this up is because one of the benefits and features of this is also having this tape measure or ruler on the side. This being a 7-inch square, I've got 7 inches here. And if I'm going up or stepping up to maybe a 12, I've got 12 inches that I can use to help me for quick framing and referencing and marking. So let's just say that I need to find the center of this 2x4. Well, I know that this is 3.5 inches in width. And if I know it's 3.5 inches, then I know that half of that is 1 3/4 inches. Doing that, I can take a mechanical pencil, specifically with this one. A lot of them you'll be fine to use at number 2. But this works just as well. A lot of times I will be using these on job sites because the lead is dispensable and doesn't break all the time, and I'm not having to try to sharpen this. And I get a nice fine point. But so just to kind of give you an idea, I'm going to go to 1 3/4 inches and then I'm going to draw my center point. And you can see that line right there. Now, that is one of the features of this tool that makes it a lot easier, because now I know my center point is right here. Now, one of the other cool and beneficial features here is that there's actually measurements here as well. Let's see if you can see those. So I've got one from this reference edge to here is 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch. Now, if I'm going to be marking for stud locations, so let's say I'm framing a door and I need to mark for my jack stud or my king stud. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and describe a mark. There's my mark. Now I know my stud is 1.5 inches wide, so I'm just going to come on over, mark that at 1.5 inches right there, and there's my stud. That's why I'm mechanical. Here's my stud. I'm going to do my jack stud. I know I just need to take that, get that to 1.5 inches, mark that, boom. Now I've got my stud locations on this board ready to go. It's one of the benefits of having this, and that's why this thing is called a speed square. I mean, look how fast I was able to make those measurements and marks. All right, so one thing that a lot of people don't actually do, and it's something that you should do all the time, is, well, if you're using this as a tool to measure, well, we need to make sure that it's actually square. And to do that is actually very simple and doesn't take much time at all. In fact, all it really takes is having a piece of material, whether it's a 2x4 or 2x6, that's got a relatively straight edge and a way to seat this against, and just striking a couple of lines to figure this out. So to do so, I'm just going to take this speed square, I'm going to seat it really nice against this edge. I am going to go ahead and scribe a line. There's my line. Now I'm going to take this, I'm just going to flip it over, do the same thing, pull this over, and you will know immediately if this is square or not. But pull that over, get it nice and seated, strike your line. If it's square, obviously these lines should overlap pretty close. If not, you're going to see deviation. It will happen. Now, the reason I use these plastic squares is because I've noticed on my aluminum ones is that every now and then this edge will get a burr or bent. And when I go ahead and set this up against material, it can be off by the slightest angle and can throw off everything. The plastic ones are nice because, one, if they don't bend, they just break, and I can replace it. The aluminum ones I'm having to check constantly just to make sure and being very careful with them. But it's inevitable that it's going to get banged up, dropped. It's going to happen. These plastic ones work really well at kind of being a little more robust. The aluminum ones you can try to bend back out, but it's not always the most effective way. And that's why I've been using plastic ones for quite a while now. It's beneficial with using this tool, and which makes it why it's called a rafter square. If you look on this, you're going to see a bunch of numbers. And on this side, let me flip this over so you can read it. We've got hip, valley, and down here we have common. Now, this is in relation to your rafter and the pitch of your roof. So let's say, for instance, that I'm going to do a 6/12 pitch. So I need to get the angle right for a 6/12. So if I go onto this common and I look for the number 6, which is right here, that's going to be my point to line up with my reference edge. So let's just put that in practice here. So let's say here's my edge of my rafter coming down. I'm going to basically want to draw my reference edge just to give me a point of knowing where I'm actually referencing this off of. I'm going to set this into here, much like we did with the angle to the pitch for like a 6/12. If I rotate this to 6, and I strike that line, boom, there's my angle to cut the end of my rafter, and now I can stick my fascia right on the end. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the hip and valley. Now, when we're doing just common rafters, we're referencing this side of the speed square. Common. We're doing hip and valley just because of the trigonometry. If we're doing a 6/12 pitch, we're going to be now referencing this inside. And just like we did with the common, we're going to reference the 6 here. We're going to reference the 6 here. We're going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to come up to a reference line, and we'll just show you just basically the difference here. when I rotate this to 6, I'm going to make sure this inside 6 is on my reference edge. Once I got it there, then, once I get it there, then I'm going to scribe my line. And now this is basically the difference. We're going to go ahead and make a cut, and we're going to use the speed square as our guide or our fence to help us make this cut and keep it nice and straight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where I want to cut. So knowing that that's where I'm going to cut, I'm going to space the speed square at the appropriate distance that will help me to make the right cut with my circular saw. But I wanted you to take note of two things. One, the position of this speed square in relation to me. I know this is flipped, but if you can see here, this part of the speed square has extended a good 3 inches past the workpiece, which that allows me to actually rest the base plate of the saw right against the square and then run it through the piece. So having this extra extension just gives me added comfort and assurance that I'm starting to cut straight, as opposed to flipping it this way where there's very little coming off the workpiece and I'm just resting the toe of the circ saw against here, trying to pass this through and hoping that once that blade hits this piece that it's going relatively straight. The other nice benefit to this, grip. I find this probably one of the more beneficial features to flipping this way, is I just feel like I can pull the piece and the speed square right into each other. It feels nice and tight, and I feel like I have a really secure planted guide that I can safely and comfortably hold while passing the saw through. But I will take note with the smaller speed squares is there's not much distance from here to here to hold on to. And depending on which way you're cutting, the circ saw, the motor offsets quite a bit from the base plate. So if you're gripping pretty close to the inside, that motor housing is probably going to end up hitting your hand. So if you're using a smaller a smaller speed square, you want to rest your hand further back. That way you're not worried about that motor housing hitting you. You could also use a larger T-square, and that problem is virtually eliminated. But for this case, and this is a 2x4, we're just going to go ahead and cut it with the smaller T-square. I keep calling it T-square. We're going to go ahead and cut it with the smaller speed square. We have our 2x4 here. We're going to go ahead and make a cut, and we're going to use the speed square as our guide or our fence to help us make this cut and keep it nice and straight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where I want to cut. So knowing that that's where I'm going to cut, I'm going to space the speed square at the appropriate distance that will help me to make the right cut with my circular saw. But I wanted you to take note of two things. One, the position of this speed square in relation to me. I know this is flipped, but if you can see here, this part of the speed square has extended a good 3 inches past the workpiece, which that allows me to actually rest the base plate of the saw right against the square and then run it through the piece. So having this extra extension just gives me added comfort and assurance that I'm starting to cut straight, as opposed to flipping it this way where there's very little coming off the workpiece and I'm just resting the toe of the circ saw against here, trying to pass this through and hoping that once that blade hits this piece that it's going relatively straight. The other nice benefit to this, grip. I find this probably one of the more beneficial features to flipping this way, is I just feel like I can pull the piece and the speed square right into each other. It feels nice and tight, and I feel like I have a really secure planted guide that I can safely and comfortably hold while passing the saw through. But I will take note with the smaller speed squares is there's not much distance from here to here to hold on to. And depending on which way you're cutting, the circ saw, the motor offsets quite a bit from the base plate. So if you're gripping pretty close to the inside, that motor housing is probably going to end up hitting your hand. So if you're using a smaller T-square, a smaller speed square, you want to rest your hand further back. That way you're not worried about that motor housing hitting you. You could also use a larger T-square, and that problem is virtually eliminated. But for this case, and this is a 2x4, we're just going to go ahead and cut it with the smaller T-square. I keep calling it T-square. We're going to go ahead and cut it with the smaller speed square. Probably use this circular saw if you haven't. Safety first, eye protection, ear protection, and dust mask if you so desire. We're going to be just making one cut, so I'm not too concerned about the dust, but safety first, right? So I'm just going to basically visually line this up as close as I can to the mark I made before. Now I'm going to take note of how far this motor housing extends out, because I have to know that if my hand's resting here, I'm going to get hit by this. So I'm going to back my hand out so I'm out of the way. I'm going to rest this against the speed square, line it up. I'm going to go ahead and make my cut. And that is pretty dang straight there. So another quick and easy feature, easy to do feature of this tool, just makes cutting straight, cutting parallel, cutting perpendicular to the reference a lot easier. Gives you confidence in what you're doing and the cut that you're about to make. All right, guys, that was just a brush up, a surface scratching introduction to this tool. Like I said in the beginning of the video, must have, I think a must have in any DIY, any just builder's, craftsman's tool bag. I mean, as you saw, this does save a lot of time. And if you're doing rough framing, if even just framing a wall or finishing out a basement, this is a great tool to have. Like I said, saves time, it's more efficient, saves headache, and it builds confidence, which I like tools that build confidence. So the other thing is, if you haven't seen on Instagram our post when we did our accent wall in our son's room, we actually ended up using the larger one, this guy, to help us lay out that trim as we attach it to the wall. A lot of those slats running at 60-degree angles were perpendicular to one another. And using this to help line up against one trim edge against the other so we can nail it and glue it in place, man, this just made it so much easier. So if you're thinking about doing accent wall projects or anything that has a lot of trim work that's making some kind of interesting geometric patterns, this comes in handy. So that's it. That's what we got for this video. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing more content. Subscribe if you can get a chance to do it, which would require you just to click. But if you get a chance, subscribe and stay tuned. Is that this, what is this called? Why do I keep saying T-square? It's not a T. So this is a 90-degree. So this square has a measurement here that helps you find, wow. It's like the big one had a baby.